Hey there. This story is one heck of a ride. A hidden GPS tracker uncovers a secret affair, but what happens next will blow your mind. Buckle up for an emotional roller coaster you will not see coming. You know, some guys are downright oblivious. I used to be one of them. Honestly, we could start a club, grab some beers, and trade stories about how clueless we all are. The catch? None of us would even realize the club was meant for us. I married Lisa back in our early 20s. I was 43 now, and she was 41. Over the years, we raised 3 kids together, and in between the chaos, we somehow managed to have a bit of fun. I grew up thinking a man should be a good husband, stay loyal, and always do right by his family. I stuck to those rules like glue. When our oldest, Emily, left for college, I started wondering what Lisa would do with the extra time on her hands. Turns out, she picked up volunteering at Eastside Memorial Hospital 3 days a week. Some days, she worked in the gift shop. Other days, she was in the kids' playroom. Occasionally, she mentioned covering other shifts, but I never pressed her for details. We still hung out with the same friends we had met while raising our kids, our little social circle. Once a month, we would gather for barbecues or house parties. I was especially tight with 3 guys, Mark, Dave, and Tom. Mostly because we all loved fishing. A few times a year, we would head out for a weekend trip, rods in hand. I thought Lisa and I had a pretty standard marriage. The kids were grown, she stayed busy, and I went to work, counting down the days to retirement. During fishing trips, the 4 of us sometimes chatted about life, even veering into the murky waters of relationships and, occasionally, love. This past May, we were out fishing. It was one of those quiet mornings on the lake, our lines in the water, speaking in low tones. Mark started telling us about his son's latest adventures at college in Michigan. Tom, though, was unusually quiet that day. After a while, I asked, "What is going on with you, Tom? You look like something is eating at you." He hesitated before finally saying, "I do not know if I should bring this up. If I am wrong, it could hurt someone. But if I am right, it will hurt us all." That hit me like a gut punch. "What did you see?" I asked cautiously. Tom nodded slowly. "I saw something. Lisa. She was parked behind the Ridgeview Hotel." My stomach churned. "When?" "3 weeks ago," he said, looking away. "And again, just a few days ago." Mark jumped in, looking shocked. "Wait, are you saying Jack's wife is cheating on him?" Tom raised his hands. "I am not saying anything for sure. I just saw her there twice in 1 month." Mark pressed further. "What were you doing at the Ridgeview?" Tom gave him a sharp look. "I deliver supplies to the hotels around town. Ridgeview is on my route." I felt a cold sweat break out. Why would Lisa be at a hotel? Twice. Could she really be stepping out on me? My thoughts were spinning out of control, but I did not want to believe it. If I left the trip early, it would feel like admitting it was true. So I stayed. When we got back to town, I borrowed Mark's car and headed home. The house was eerily quiet. Lisa was not there. I sat down at the computer, trying to figure out what to do next. After some searching, I found a few discreet tracking devices and ordered them to be shipped to my office. That evening, when Lisa got home, I tried to play it cool. I tested the waters, making a move on her, but she brushed me off, blaming it on hormones. She said it was just her age. Life went on like that for a week. Normal on the surface, but I was on edge, suspicious of everything. The first package arrived, and that night I slipped into the garage to install a GPS tracker under Lisa's car. Now, I could monitor her every move. The next day, another package came, this time an audio recorder. I installed that in her car as well, giving me access to her conversations. The following morning, Lisa was not scheduled to be at the hospital. Over breakfast, she casually mentioned she might go shopping. From my office, I tracked her as she went to Willow Creek Mall and then stopped by a local grocery store. By 1 o'clock, she was back home. But at 1:40, I saw her leave the house again. This time, her route was suspicious. She drove south for 10 minutes, then east, and then circled around until she ended up at the Ridgeview Hotel. My heart sank. I could not sit still. I left work and drove straight to the hotel. A few minutes later, I parked my car in a discreet spot, close enough to keep an eye on hers without being noticed. At exactly 4:20 p.m., Lisa walked out of the hotel. She moved with purpose, heading straight for her car. As she pulled out of the parking lot, I caught sight of someone else leaving through the same door. Ethan Roberts, a guy we knew from the neighborhood. Ethan. I could not believe my eyes. He was married to Claire, one of the kindest and most gorgeous women in our friend group. He gave Lisa a casual nod as she drove past, then strolled to his own car and drove off like nothing had happened. I was frozen in place, my mind racing. My phone rang suddenly, snapping me back to reality. It was Lisa. "Hey, John," she said cheerfully. "What do you feel like having for dinner tonight?" "Dinner?" I echoed, barely able to think. Maybe something light? A salad or grilled salmon." "Sure, sounds good. I should be home a little after 5. We hung up, and I sat there a little longer, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Finally, I took a deep breath and headed into the hotel. At the front desk, I spotted someone familiar, Megan, the daughter of one of my clients. She worked there part-time as a receptionist. We exchanged polite hellos, and then I leaned in. "Hey, Megan, I think a friend of mine might be staying here. Could you check for me?" "Of course. What is the name?" she asked, smiling. "Ethan Roberts," I said, bracing myself for her response. She typed quickly, then looked up. "Room 207. He checks in every Thursday morning and leaves the following day." "Every Thursday?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Yeah, pretty much. Sometimes more often, but Thursdays are a regular thing." I hesitated, then lowered my voice. "Can you tell how long he has been doing this?" She tapped a few more keys and nodded. "Looks like he started back in February." I swallowed hard. "Would it get you in trouble if you printed out his stay history for me?" Megan glanced around the lobby, then leaned in closer. "Nobody is watching. Do you want a copy?" "Yes, please," I said quietly. She handed me the printout, neatly tucked into a folder. I thanked her and slipped it into my bag before heading back to my car. I was not sure what I would do with it yet, but I knew I needed it. When I got home, Lisa had dinner ready, grilled salmon and salad, just like she had promised. As we ate, she talked about her shopping trip, casually mentioning Willow Creek Mall and the grocery store but leaving out any mention of the Ridgeview Hotel. I sat there, staring at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. She was lying to me, plain and simple. My mind wandered, wondering if she had rushed to shower before I got home, scrubbing away any traces of Ethan or the hotel. After dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom and checked the shower. It was damp, and a small pile of clothes sat in the laundry basket. Every detail added fuel to the fire building inside me. Why was Lisa doing this? And why Ethan? Later that night, while she sat reading on the couch, I went on my computer. I had a plan. I opened our family contact list and found Claire Roberts' email addresses. She had one for personal use and another for her job as a real estate agent. Using a blank email account, I typed out a message to her work address. Subject: "You deserve to know. If you want proof of Ethan's affair, who, when, and where, reply to this email. I have evidence. I do not want anything in return." I sent the message at 8:15 p.m. By 9 o'clock, I checked my inbox and found her reply. "I can meet tomorrow anytime. I will be at 328 Maple Street all day showing houses. Let us talk during my lunch break, around 1 o'clock. I deleted the emails from both my inbox and hers. When I went to bed, Lisa was already asleep, breathing peacefully. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, going over everything again and again. The next morning, Lisa went about her routine as if nothing had changed, cheerfully getting ready for her volunteer shift. I kissed her goodbye and acted like everything was fine. Around noon, I called her. "Hey, I thought I would take care of dinner tonight. What do you think?" "You are cooking?" she asked, sounding amused. "Yeah, I was thinking jambalaya. Does that work?" "That sounds amazing," she replied, her voice full of enthusiasm. I checked the GPS tracker on her car. She was still at the hospital. On my way to meet Claire, I swung by Ethan's office. As I pulled up, I saw him and two co-workers leaving, heading to a sandwich shop nearby. I quickly parked, got out, and installed a second GPS tracker on his car. At 1 o'clock, I arrived a few houses down from the open house Claire was hosting. When I walked up, she spotted me through the window. Her face went pale, and she hurried to lock the door behind me. She flipped the sign to lunch break and led me to a small sofa inside. She sat down, her eyes already brimming with tears, and waited for me to speak. I opened my bag, pulled out the folder, and handed it to her. She flipped through the pages, her hands shaking as the tears spilled over. "I am so sorry," I murmured. Through her sobs, she looked up at me, her voice quivering with heartbreak. "That jerk has been cheating on me for months? With my husband?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "I am afraid so." Her face crumpled as tears streamed down her cheeks. She wiped them away, composing herself after a moment. This is bad, but it is not enough. These records are just a start. If we are going to confront them, we need irrefutable proof." I agreed. "You are right. We cannot jump the gun. It has been hard enough keeping my head straight, but we need to stay smart about this." For the next hour, we sat together brainstorming our approach. By the time we finished, it was almost 4 o'clock, and her open house had been a bust with no visitors. At least we had a plan in motion. That night, I combed through conference schedules online, looking for events that could serve as a cover for our operation. I found two: a tech summit in Las Vegas for professionals in my field and a real estate seminar for agents. I forwarded the details to Claire, who immediately agreed we should use them as an excuse to get away. I booked my spot and mentioned the conference to Lisa later that evening. "It could be a great way to meet people in the industry," I said. "Want to come along?" She looked hesitant. "I do not know. Vegas sounds exhausting for a 3-day trip." The next day, Claire presented the real estate conference to Ethan, inviting him to join her. He declined, saying he had too much work piling up. Meanwhile, Lisa called me at work and casually mentioned visiting her sister for a couple of days instead of going on the trip. I feigned disappointment and dropped the topic. That afternoon, I reached out to my lawyer, Mike Carter. He had always handled my business matters, but now I needed help with something personal. After confirming he had no connections to Lisa, I explained everything. Mike walked me through the potential fallout of a divorce, property division, legal fees, the works. I took notes on my computer, and together, we sketched out a strategy to protect myself financially. He suggested hiring a private investigator to get definitive proof of Lisa's affair. At 4 o'clock, Claire called from a pay phone. "I booked a room at the Mirage," she said. "Where are you staying?" "Treasure Island," I replied. We discussed what to bring and how to avoid suspicion. I suggested she pack a burner phone, a notebook, and her laptop for appearances. That evening, I started packing. Lisa walked in as I zipped up my suitcase. She noticed it sitting on the bed and raised an eyebrow. "You forgot your swim trunks," she said with a teasing grin. "I am not planning on lounging by the pool," I replied flatly. "Swimming is good for stress," she added with a smile. I sighed and tossed the trunks into my bag, not wanting to spark an argument. She left the room without another word. After packing, I loaded the suitcase into my car and went through our usual routine. Before bed, I asked if she wanted to spend some time together, but she waved me off. "Maybe when you get back," she teased, flashing a half smile. I left the house before sunrise the next morning, the sky still painted in shades of gray. Around 7:30 a.m., as I passed through a quiet stretch of road near Pomona, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Where are you?" she asked. "Just outside Pomona," I replied. "There is a little diner ahead, the one we used to stop at during family trips to the beach." "That works," she said. "I will meet you there in 20 minutes. I pulled into the parking lot and waited. When Claire arrived, she stepped out of her car wearing jeans, a plaid button-up, and hiking boots. It was such a departure from the polished realtor I was used to that I almost did not recognize her. Her smile, however, was unmistakably genuine. We grabbed a booth inside and ordered breakfast. Over eggs and toast, we talked about everything: our anger, our sadness, and how surreal it all felt. I realized I was seeing Claire in a new light, not just as Ethan's wife, but as a real person navigating the same storm I was. When she mentioned dreading the long drive to Vegas alone, I had an idea. After breakfast, we found a nearby lot where she could leave her car. The parking fee was reasonable, so we transferred her luggage into my car and hit the road together. As we drove, we mapped out our strategy. Claire jotted down notes in her notebook, and we discussed every detail of what we would do once we had undeniable proof. By the time we stopped for gas in Baker, the initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of solidarity. In Las Vegas, I dropped Claire off at the Mirage and checked into my room at Treasure Island. We agreed to meet later for dinner to finalize our plan. Back in my room, I called Mike. He answered with a chuckle. "You can come back now," he said. "Your wife went straight to Ethan's house. We got it all on video." "There is no doubt?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "None. They even had a magazine with today's date sitting on the coffee table." "Start the process," I said, my voice firm. "Have you informed Claire yet?" "Months with your wife," Claire repeated, her voice shaky. "Unfortunately, yes," I said softly. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I already spoke with your lawyer. With this evidence, we can save ourselves a lot of hassle and money." "Thanks," I replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I asked, "Can I run a hypothetical by you?" "Of course," Tom, my lawyer, said on the other end of the line. "What if Claire and I do not know, started seeing each other while we are here in Vegas?" Tom chuckled. "Unless someone is actively following either of you, nothing will come of it. Just make sure you spread your time between your rooms. By the way, do you want your wife served with divorce papers before you get back?" "No," I said firmly. "I want to be home, changing the locks before Lisa gets served. And I want to see if you can secure a restraining order to keep her away from the business and the house." "When do you want this ready?" he asked. "I will talk to Claire and let you know," I replied before hanging up. About an hour later, I arrived at Caesar's Palace and found the restaurant where Claire and I had agreed to meet for dinner. We kept the conversation light at first, focusing on small talk. After our drinks arrived, I stepped outside to call Tom and update him. "Do not move forward until we are back," I instructed. "Let your investigator gather as much as possible while we are away. It is better to have more than enough evidence than just barely enough." When I returned to the table, Claire and I finished our meal and wandered around the shops inside Caesar's Palace. The tension between us was undeniable, but we did not cross any lines. The image of Lisa with Ethan kept flashing through my mind, and I could tell Claire was wrestling with similar thoughts about her husband. Eventually, Claire yawned and admitted she was tired. I hailed her a cab, and just before she climbed in, there was a moment, a look between us where it felt like we might kiss. We both wanted it, but something held us back. It just was not the right time. Back at my hotel room, I took a long shower, letting the hot water calm me. As I was drying off, my phone rang. It was Lisa. "Hey," she said. "Where have you been?" "I had dinner at Caesar's Palace," I replied, keeping my tone casual. "Walked around a bit afterward. I saw some clothes I thought you might like. Want me to pick something up?" "Sexy clothes?" she asked with a laugh. "You know I do not dress like that anymore. I am almost 50, John." "So no?" I asked. "Yeah, no sexy clothes," she said, her tone softening. "But if you see a nice piece of jewelry, maybe grab that instead." "Sure," I said. "I will take a look tomorrow. I am turning in for the night. Good night, Lisa. I love you." "Good night," she replied, but she did not say it back. Her silence stung more than I wanted to admit. Just as I was about to turn off my phone, it rang again. This time, it was Claire. "Open the door," she said. I did as she asked, and she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I was still in a towel, and she was in the same jeans and boots from earlier. "Ethan does not even care that I am gone," she said quietly. "He is with your wife right now, in our bed." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "I thought about this the whole way back to the hotel. At first, I wanted to be with you because they cheated on us. But now it feels like more than that. I do not want to spend the next few years crying over him or feeling sorry for myself. I want to move forward, with you, but not out of revenge. I need to feel loved, not used." I nodded and pulled her into my arms. "We will not rush anything. Let us just take this one step at a time." That night, we stayed together, but not in the way I had initially imagined. We lay side by side, talking, holding each other, and finding comfort in the shared warmth. By the time we got up the next morning, it was nearly noon. Claire needed to change clothes, so I drove her back to the Mirage. While she was in her room, I called Tom again. Ethan and Lisa spent the night together at his house, Tom said. The investigator caught it all on video. There is even a newspaper on the table with today's date. Good, I replied. That should be more than enough. Thank you. After Claire rejoined me, we decided to head out to Lake Mead for the afternoon. As we drove, we talked endlessly, pouring out all the anger and sadness we had bottled up. By the time we reached Kingman, Arizona, the anger had faded, replaced by a bittersweet clarity. Over dinner, we both admitted something we had been avoiding. Neither of us had truly loved our spouses for years. We loved our kids, but the connection between us and them had faded long ago. When we got back to Las Vegas, I checked out of my hotel and moved into Claire's room at the Mirage. That night, we finally gave in to the feelings we had been holding back. It was not just about love. It was about finding solace in each other. She cried softly as we lay together, and I nearly did too, but I held back. The next day, as we returned home, we stopped at the lot where Claire had parked her car. As we transferred her luggage, she turned to me. "What now?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. I smiled. "Now, I think I want to wake up next to you every morning. We cannot go back to the way things were. They made their choices, and so have we." She nodded slowly, her lips curving into a small smile. "Let us not waste any more time." Claire looked at me, her voice soft but steady. "So, this is it? We can make this real? Live our lives without anger, without feeling betrayed?" "Yes," I said firmly. "We get to choose how this ends." We sat there for a moment, the weight of it all sinking in. Then, she leaned in closer. "Are we really doing this? You want us to live together, both get divorced, and leave everything behind?" "Yes," I said again, my voice resolute. "The day the divorce is final, I want to marry you." "Claire, will you marry me?" Her eyes widened, and she hesitated. "It feels so fast. We barely know each other. Not like this." "We have known each other for years," I replied. "This is not new. We are just finally seeing what was always there. I love you. I am ready to commit to loving you right now." She looked down, thinking. After a long pause, she whispered, "I love you too, Jack. Let me think about everything while I drive." She left, and I drove back to my office. When I pulled into the parking lot, Claire was already there, waiting for me. She opened my car door, slipped into the seat beside me, and grinned. "Yes," she said, her face lighting up. "I love you. Yes, I want to wake up next to you every morning. And yes, I will marry you." I exhaled, feeling a rush of relief and joy. "What do we do next?" Claire asked, her hand brushing mine. "We need to talk to them," I said, glancing at the GPS trackers. Both Ethan's and Lisa's cars were parked at Claire's house. "Let us go," I said. We drove to her house, parking a block away to avoid being seen. Entering through the back door, we moved quietly into the living room. There they were, Lisa and Ethan, sitting close together on the couch, laughing about something. I motioned for Claire to sit on the sofa across from them. Without a word, we sat down and waited. Lisa was the first to notice us. She froze, her face turning pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. Ethan jumped to his feet, looking startled. "Jack, Claire, this is not what it looks like." "Sit down," I said, my voice low and controlled. "We will talk in a moment." Lisa stood as if to plead with me, her hands trembling. "Jack, let me explain." "You will get your chance," I said sharply. "For now, go upstairs and get dressed." They exchanged nervous glances and hurried out of the room. Claire and I gathered their scattered clothes and carried them to the bathroom. Once we heard the water running, I quietly opened the door, tossed the clothes inside, and walked back to the living room. I found Claire kneeling on the carpet, scrubbing at a small stain. "Choose," I said softly. She looked up at me, confused. "Choose what? Where do you want to live? My house or yours?" Her brows knitted together. "Why do I get to decide?" "Because they are the ones who destroyed everything," I said simply. "We get to decide what happens next." Before she could answer, Lisa and Ethan returned, fully dressed. I gestured toward the couch opposite us, and they sat down, their bodies stiff with tension. Claire moved to sit beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Claire held up a hand, stopping him. I leaned forward, my voice calm but deliberate. Ethan, do you love Lisa? Or is this just about physical relationship? He stared at the floor for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he said, I think I love her. I turned to Lisa. Lisa, do you love Ethan? Yes, she said quickly, without hesitation. If neither of you were married to us, I asked, would you live together? Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. I do not want a divorce. So, what do you want? I asked, my tone sharper now. Permission to keep sleeping with my wife? Ethan's face reddened, and he looked at me with regret. I did not want you to find out. I did not want anyone to get hurt. Lisa broke down, sobbing into her hands. Jack, I never meant for this to happen. I am so sorry. You planned it, I said evenly. You went to that hotel with him over 20 times. You destroyed our marriage. Do not act like this was an accident. I turned to Ethan. You have 5 minutes to pack your things and leave. You can work out the rest with my lawyer. Claire checked her watch. Ethan did not move. For minutes, she said coolly. Ethan sighed, defeated, and stood up. I followed him as he went to the bedroom, watching as he packed a suitcase. You do not want to be here when the timer runs out, I warned, my voice low and firm. He zipped up his bag and walked out without a word to Lisa or Claire. I returned to the living room and found Lisa sitting there, her face streaked with tears. Lisa, I said firmly, go pack your things. It is time for you to leave. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but then thought better of it and nodded. As she turned toward the stairs, I added, you can negotiate with my lawyer about what you are entitled to, but do not step foot in this house again unless he approves it. And Lisa, if you or Ethan come anywhere near my property without permission, I will make sure everyone knows the truth, including our kids. I stood by the door as she left, watching the weight of my words sink in. Claire locked the door behind her, the click echoing in the sudden quiet. I stepped outside and followed Lisa to her car. She moved slowly, loading her belongings into the trunk. As she climbed into the driver's seat, Ethan's car pulled up behind her. They stayed there for a moment, not driving off, so I turned on the audio recorder in Lisa's car. This is really happening, Ethan said after a pause. They are serious. They are divorcing us. Lisa let out a bitter laugh. Jack is done with me. He said I was heartless. And maybe he is right. You are not heartless, Ethan replied softly. But what do we do now? Lisa's voice cracked, anger bubbling beneath the surface. That is just it. You keep asking me what I am going to do. This is not just my mess, Ethan. It is ours. But here you are, acting like this is all on me. I am not. You are, she snapped, her voice breaking. I have lost everything. My family, my home. And you? You are just sitting here like you do not have a care in the world. Like this does not matter to you at all. There was silence, followed by the sound of a car door opening and closing. Ethan had climbed into the passenger seat, and their voices faded as they drove off. I turned off the audio, my chest heavy. No matter how much pain Lisa had caused, a small part of me still hated seeing her this broken. But it was too late for second chances. I walked back inside, heading to the garage. Years ago, I had bought a new set of locks but never got around to installing them. Now felt like the perfect time. For the next hour, I replaced every lock in the house, making sure Lisa's keys would no longer work. When I finished, I called Claire. How are you holding up? I asked. It was harder than I expected, she admitted. Ethan left, but he did not make it easy. I am on my way to your place now. Good, I said. I will see you soon. 15 minutes later, Claire arrived. She walked in and immediately sank into the kitchen chair across from me. We sat there, talking through everything. Lisa's departure, Ethan's resistance, and the future we were now facing. I cannot believe we are really doing this, Claire said after a while, a sad smile tugging at her lips. Starting over. I nodded. We have already made the decision. Now, we just have to see it through. She stared at the table, lost in thought. You know, a few days ago, I was still hoping Ethan and I might fix things. But now I see he never wanted to fix it. Neither did Lisa. I feel the same way, I admitted. I held on to the idea of what we had for too long. But that life is gone. Now we can move forward. We hugged, holding on to the comfort of shared understanding. The past was behind us, and something new was waiting ahead. The next morning, Claire and I started packing up her things. We agreed she would move into my house temporarily while we figured out a long-term plan. As we boxed up items, her phone rang. It was her daughter, Katie. Mom, where are you? I called Dad, and he told me to ask you what is going on. Claire's expression hardened, but she kept her tone steady. Katie, can you come home? Bring your brother, too. We need to talk. Katie tried to press for answers, but Claire stood firm. We will explain everything when you get here. After she hung up, she turned to me, her face a mix of nerves and resolve. It is time to tell the kids, isn't it? I nodded. Yeah, it is time. I called my own kids, Emily, Kyle, and Matt, and asked them to come over. They could hear the tension in my voice and knew something was wrong, but like Claire, I told them we would talk when they arrived. We also called our lawyer, Tom, to let him know about the family meeting. He promised to have all the evidence on hand if we needed it and to be available for any questions. By the afternoon, all of the kids, hers and mine, were sitting in the living room. Claire and I sat on one side. While they sat on the other, confusion and worry etched on their faces. Taking a deep breath, I began. I know you have noticed things have not been right between your mom and me, or between your mom and Ethan. There is a reason for that. I turned to my kids and continued, a few weeks ago, I discovered that your mom has been having an affair. I have proof. It is undeniable. I paused, letting my words sink in as the weight of the situation settled over the room. I let the room fall silent, the weight of my words pressing down on everyone. My kids sat still, their eyes wide, their emotions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Finally, I continued. I had suspicions, I admitted, so I installed a GPS tracker on your mom's car. What I found confirmed everything. She has been meeting with Ethan Roberts, and this has been going on for months. Kyle leaned forward, his brow furrowed. You are sure? You are saying Mom has been cheating on you? Are you really sure about this? I wish I was wrong, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I am not. I have seen them together, and I have the hotel records to back it up. I glanced at Claire, who straightened in her seat, her expression resolute. She looked at her children and spoke gently but firmly. Your dad, Ethan, has been seeing Jack's wife, Lisa, she said. I know this is hard to hear, but it is the truth. I have the proof if you feel like you need to see it. She paused, letting her words sink in. But this is not about staying stuck in the past. Your dad and I are done, and I am filing for divorce. Claire's daughter, Katie, sat motionless, her face pale. Her father had always been a role model to her, and now that image was crumbling. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We are selling the house, Claire said simply. Jack and I have started talking about what the future might look like. It will not be easy, but we are moving forward. Matt, my youngest, blurted out, So, are you two together now? Claire and I exchanged a glance. I spoke first. We are just beginning, I said carefully. But yes, we are moving in that direction. The room fell silent again, this time thoughtful rather than shocked. After a long pause, Katie stood and walked to the table where the envelope of evidence sat. Her hands shook as she pulled out a single photograph, her father and my wife, caught in a moment that could not be explained away. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not break. He is such a coward, she muttered, her voice thick with disappointment. She slid the photo back into the envelope and handed it to me. I cannot believe he did this to us. I rested a hand on her shoulder. I know this hurts, I said softly. Across the room, Kyle and Matt were frozen, their faces unreadable. Samantha, my oldest, looked at me with tears in her eyes. What do we do now, Dad? She asked. Now, I said, we pick up the pieces and rebuild. It will take time, but Claire and I will figure it out together. For now, we are here for you. Whatever you need. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of us. Samantha wiped at her eyes. Kyle stared at the floor, and Matt sat quietly, lost in his thoughts. Finally, Matt broke the silence. "Are you really selling the house, Mom?" he asked Claire, his voice shaky. Claire nodded, giving him a soft, sad smile. "Yes, sweetheart. I do not need all this space anymore. And honestly, I think it is time to start fresh. This house, it holds too many memories." Katie squared her shoulders, her expression shifting to one of quiet resolve. "We will get through this," she said firmly. "We always do. It is going to take time, but we will figure it out." She glanced at me, then back at her mom. "If you are happy with Jack, and you really think this is right, I will support you." Claire's eyes welled up as she pulled her daughter into a hug. "Thank you, honey. That means more to me than you know." Kyle finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not know what to say," he admitted. "I am mad at Mom. I am mad at Ethan. But if this is what has to happen, I will deal with it." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of sadness and frustration. I need time." "I get it," I said. "Take as much time as you need. None of this is easy for any of us." For a moment, the room fell silent again. Claire eventually broke the tension. "Why do we not grab some dinner? It has been a long day, and I think we could all use a little break." We ordered from Dragon Garden, a Chinese restaurant the kids had always loved. Dinner was quiet, but a little less heavy. The kids asked questions about the divorces, the logistics of selling the house, and what life would look like going forward. Claire and I answered honestly, reassuring them that while things were going to change, we would figure it out step by step. By the end of the evening, Katie looked at me, her voice hesitant. "I still cannot believe Dad could do something like this. It does not feel real." Katie looked at me, her expression torn. "I do not want to believe this," she said quietly, "but I cannot deny what you have shown me. I hope you and Claire find happiness now." I gave her a reassuring smile. "We will. And all of us will get through this together." The evening ended with a surprising sense of hope. The kids were still grappling with the betrayal, but they seemed willing to move forward and give us a chance to start anew. Later that night, after the kids had gone and Claire and I were alone, she leaned against the kitchen counter and sighed deeply. "Well," she said, "that went better than I expected." I nodded. "It is a lot for them to process, but I think they are stronger than we give them credit for." She smiled softly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I was so nervous about how they would take it, but now I feel like maybe we can really do this. Maybe we can build something new." I stepped closer, placing my hands gently on her shoulders. "We can, Claire. We already are." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Claire and I worked through our divorce paperwork, meeting with Tom to iron out details and make plans for the future. Each step felt heavy, but with each decision, the path ahead became a little clearer. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of calls and meetings, Claire and I sat on the couch, talking quietly. We were planning the logistics of selling her house, figuring out the best way to merge our lives. It was daunting, but having a plan gave us a sense of direction. A few days later, Claire's kids came by to help pack. Each box we filled carried memories of the home they had grown up in. I could see the sadness in Claire's eyes as she folded away pieces of her life, but she remained determined, her focus on the future. By the end of the day, the house was starting to feel less like a home and more like a chapter ready to be closed. That weekend, we planned a camping trip with all the kids. It was something we had done together years ago, before everything fell apart. The kids thought it might help us reconnect and begin rebuilding as one family. I could sense their nervousness as we packed the cars and headed to the campsite. But there was also a quiet excitement, a hope that maybe this trip could be the start of something better. When we arrived, we set up tents and built a fire. The kids relaxed quickly, sharing stories and laughing as if the weight of the past few months had been lifted. For the first time in a long while, there was peace. As the fire crackled that night, Katie broke the silence. "This feels good," she said softly. "I never thought I would feel normal again after everything, but being here, all of us together, it helps." Samantha smiled at me, her eyes warm. "It is strange, but I am glad we are here. It feels like maybe things will be okay after all." I looked at Claire, her face glowing in the firelight. A warmth spread through me, something I had not felt in years. We had both endured so much heartache, but sitting there, surrounded by our kids, I knew we were finally moving forward. The next morning, we went on a hike through the woods. The kids led the way, their laughter echoing through the trees. It was as if the pain and tension of the past had melted away. Claire walked beside me, her steps light. "This trip," she said, glancing at me, "was exactly what we needed." I smiled. "I think so too." We returned to the campsite in the late afternoon, tired but content. That night, as we sat around the fire again, I realized just how much we had grown as a family. The scars from the past were still there, but they were healing. Months passed. The divorces were finalized, and Claire sold her house. She moved into mine, and together, we started building a new life. The kids adjusted slowly but steadily. They respected our decision to move forward and began to embrace the changes. The holidays came and went, bringing with them new traditions and memories. The pain of the past lingered, but with each passing day, it became a little easier to bear. Then, one day, we got news that Ethan had been sentenced to several years in prison. His actions, combined with other charges, had finally caught up to him. The kids were unsurprised and expressed no interest in seeing him. It was just another chapter closed. As for Lisa, she vanished after withdrawing a large amount of money. No one heard from her again. At first, her absence weighed on the kids, but eventually, they accepted it. She had chosen her path, and they chose theirs. For years past, every summer, we continued our tradition of family camping trips. These trips became a way to reconnect, to reflect on how far we had come. We did not forget the past, but we refused to let it define us. Where others might have let betrayal destroy them, we found a way to rebuild. One evening, as I sat by the campfire with Claire and the kids, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had come so far, through so much. And though life was not perfect, we had created something beautiful out of the ashes. No matter what the future held, I knew we would face it together. Share your thoughts in the comments. Was it right for the characters to use technology, like GPS trackers, to uncover the truth? Where should the line be drawn? If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.